was coming from the club one night and I heard somebody playing Salt and Pepper and I almost lost it. I wanted to get out and just dance in the street like, yes, push it good. Like I was like, you get it, okay. Hey everybody, it's Candy and I'm coming to you here with a video answering some more of your questions about the Peace Corps. I had a comment from a young lady on one of my videos who was asking, a series of questions. They were great questions. I was happy to answer them, but I figured that other people would have the same kind of questions, so why not make a video and share it with everybody else? So the first question that she asked was, what made you do the Peace Corps? So for one, I'm very blessed. I could have been born at any time to any set of parents under any set of circumstances. I feel obligated to share what I have been able to learn and to leverage my accomplishments to help other people. I felt like after I graduated from law school and I got into the real world, there were a set of challenges that revealed myself to me. In other words, I realized that I'm not a perfect specimen and that there are a lot of things that I could stand to change and improve. So I felt that going to the Peace Corps would not only take me outside of my comfort zone, but it would also put me in a place of isolation where I would have to confront my demons and also learning how to work with less resources than we're used to in the United States in order to help the low income. I wanted to really build upon my own skills so that I could be able to serve other people better, but also have a greater sense of like mental health in the end of the day based upon the skills that I was able to acquire in this setting. So the next question is, do you live with other Mongolians, and did you personally have a hard time getting along with them? First off, I live by myself now, but during the first 2.5 months of my service, I was in what they call pre-service training. And during that time, I lived with a host family. I will admit that I did have a lot of adjustment issues. It wasn't because of them, it was more so because of me. I came into their home putting expectations on their behavior and on their lifestyle in the sense of how an American should live. But we're not in America, we're in Mongolia. I would recommend that you read a book called From Foreign to Familiar, and that will explain the dynamics between a hot culture and a cold culture. But as you can tell by the labels, they're two very different cultures. And oftentimes, a lot of the standards and norms and protocols are starkly different. And those things are not to be taken lightly, because those are the differences between being respectful and disrespectful, or being uppity versus being humble. I can't look at them in terms of an American. They are Mongolian, and this is the way that they do things. And if I want to thrive in this environment, I have to take away all of those norms and all of those expectations and really try to understand why they do the things that they do, so that I can have a better understanding of it and that I can respect it and also fall in line with what their culture requires and dictates. So the friction that ensued during that time that I was reaching that destination mentally was very challenging, because oftentimes I would get turned off by things, and then they would be able to read my body language and things like that, and then they would get turned off by that, or in turn I would do something that in their culture would be considered disrespectful. They would be turned off, I would notice it, and then that would turn me off. And so there were times where there was just a miscommunication and a misunderstanding. And so the beautiful thing was that we were able to see past those differences, and we were able to not only forgive one another, but also find the value in those experiences. And I think that's where, regardless if you get along or not all conflict is bad, and oftentimes it can lead to some very profound growth. So, would you have stayed in a yurt? For all of those who are not familiar, a yurt is a circular, like, tent that has a wooden structure covered by cloth. And in the wintertime, they even reinforce that barrier with felt to keep the heat. I would like to say that I would have, but I stayed in a gear for like 4 days in December, and I realized that it is extremely difficult. And literally, you spend the whole day doing chores just so that you're able to survive in a very harsh climate. With that being considered, I can't necessarily say that I would have stuck it out, but I do think that human nature is to adapt for sheer survival. So, with that being considered, I want to have enough faith in myself to say that I could have, but you never know. How difficult was the language barrier? The language barrier was extremely difficult. However, there are ways around it. For one, I know enough language to get in a cab and be able to direct that person to my home. I'm able to tell him where I live, how to get there, turn by turn, and to let them know that, okay, I'm home. How much does it cost? And I give them the money. I know how to go to the store, ask them, do you have this? Do you have that? How much does this cost? I'm able to bargain, stuff like that. So it's enough for me to survive. But as far as having a philosophical conversation, no. And, some people would think, oh, that's silly. Of course you can't do that. But unfortunately, I'm not just a tourist here. I actually work here. So doing highly complex work here in the public health sector can be extremely difficult because oftentimes we have to talk about, big public health issues. We have to come up with a solution. We have to have a strategic plan. We have to develop materials together. And I work with people who are on a large spectrum of English speaking proficiency. So some people I'm able to communicate just fine. We can have a full conversation. We might have to use Google Translate for a couple of things, but for the most part, we can understand each other. There are other people who only know how to say good morning, how are you, I'm fine, thanks, goodbye. That's it. I will say that sometimes those people are less likely to work with me because that language barrier and the time that it takes for us to finally get one sentence out and for us to both understand what we're trying to say, it makes the planning process and the coordination process 4 times as long. And oftentimes under tight deadlines, you just don't have that kind of time. So I've learned that it's not personal. It's not that they don't want to work with me. It's just that they don't feel that they can. And while I'm willing to bridge that gap using whatever tools that I need to use, it takes 2 people to have to work together. So to get around that, what I do is I work with the people who can work with me, who are willing to fight through that barrier. And what I do is I build their capacity to co-facilitate teaching or co-facilitate trainings. And so they are able to share the knowledge that they have gained through working with me with other people using their native language. What was your most useful experience? So my most useful experience has been learning to work with people who have an extremely different culture and professional code of ethics than I do. I want to tread very carefully in saying this, but I believe that Mongolians here might find it extremely difficult to work in the United States because there are some things that Mongolians do every day without thinking twice about it, and nobody really makes a big hoopla about, that in America would get you fired right then and there. Um, so going to work and having to experience those things and having to say, okay, I'm not going to get offended. That's just the way it is here. That's extremely unprofessional in America, but right now I ain't in America. So you have to learn how to just adapt to that culture. So sometimes that means that I have to kind of foresee these things happening and already be proactive in how I'm going to respond or how I'm going to adapt to that particular dynamic. The next question is, what do you consider the most valuable thing that you brought with you? The most valuable thing that I brought with me was my laptop. My laptop is my gateway and my medium to the rest of the world. I think without that, it would be very difficult for me because oftentimes my social life is very limited here. Um, I'm also working on a lot of things with my own personal professional pursuits. So without my personal computer, I wouldn't be able to work on those things in my spare time. The next question is, what do you love most about the land and the people? I will post some pictures of the landscape to this video, and I think that it speaks for itself. Mongolia has tons of open natural land that is largely untouched except for by the grazing of the animals. So it's just beautiful because in America we don't have that. We don't have part we don't have land that is unclaimed by somebody. There is just not like an open land that anybody can go without trespassing. And it's beautiful. They have some beautiful landscapes, mountains, grass, rivers, all kinds of stuff. The people, what I love about the people is that they are so hospitable. They're very kind. They're very sharing. It's a very communal kind of culture. So you can ask somebody for something on the street, and I would say you got a 50-50% chance that they'll say yes, which is much bigger than your chances in America. Also, people are very curious about blacks. In a land, in America, what I found is that there are a lot of prejudices, there are a lot of preconceived notions, a lot of frustrations between the races from both sides. Here in Mongolia, people are not like that towards me. They are actually very sympathetic to the black experience. Um, I've heard young children making whole presentations about racism in America, talking about scientific studies that prove that prejudices do exist, that racism exists, and that they are making a plea to Mongolians to never become that way. And I've been very proud to see that there is a great deal of open-mindedness and compassion in this, country, and I love that. What do I miss the most? What I miss the most is my family, of course. You know, when you leave the country and your friendship no longer is convenient for people, unless I'm on social media, 99% of the friends that I have, I would never hear from and I would never talk to. It's no shade. I don't care. Do you? I can't get mad about that kind of stuff. But I do realize that family is extremely important, and those are the people who are really in your corner. Some other things that I really miss is just American culture. I miss hip hop. I miss, old school music just being played in the streets and, in people's cars. I was coming from the club one night and I heard somebody playing Salt and Pepper and I almost lost it. I wanted to get out and just dance in the street like, yes, push it. Push it good. Like, I was like, you get it, okay? But so I was like, okay, it made me realize that I really do miss my people. I miss my culture. So those are all the questions that the young lady asked me. Again, I would love to hear more of your questions. Don't feel, shy. Go ahead and leave me a comment in the comment section or hit me up on social media if you're my friend on social media. And until next time, love and blessings.